over the last couple of weeks, Donald Trump has gotten particularly pardon happy. He has, in recent days, pardoned a whole bunch of people, including NBA YoungBoy. That this was not on my bingo card. I don't like. Does Donald Trump know who NBA YoungBoy is? Is he familiar with the ad lib of doom? Additionally, who in his circle knows NBA YoungBoy? Like, is aware of NBA YoungBoy? That's really fascinating to me. YoungBoy was in prison serving gun charges. There are, however, more insidious actors that Donald Trump is pardoning. Now, let me just put this out into the ether. I theoretically do not have a problem with pardons. I do believe that if there was someone who was either unjustly committed or convicted of a crime, or someone whose prison sentence does not match the severity of the crime that they committed, I do believe that they should be eligible for a pardon, especially in the former case. In the latter case, I do believe they should be eligible for a pardon only after they seem to be rehabilitated. In Trump's first term, there was this lady who he pardoned whose name is Alice Johnson, and she actually has an appointment in the Trump administration as what he dubbed the pardon czar. Alice Johnson was she was a she was a lower income individual living in Mississippi, and to help make ends meet, she got involved in selling drugs. She wound up being arrested and convicted of these crimes, whether it was possession, distribution. I believe there was money laundering charges as well, although I don't know if that was conspiracy or actual money laundering. Her sentence as a first time nonviolent offender was life imprisonment without the possibility of parole plus 25 years. That is absolutely despicable. That is not fair. That is not an appropriate punishment for the crime that she committed. That is not appropriate. It's really a fucking disgusting situation, and highlights the systemic issues that black Americans deal with in the criminal justice system, because Alice Johnson is a black American, and that probably led to her being treated like this. It also happened in the 90s with the whole, during the whole war on drugs epidemic, but still, that is definitely not a punishment that suits the crime. With the lobbying of Kim Kardashian, she got her sentence commuted and then ultimately pardoned after spending 20 years in prison. That is an issue where I don't have an issue, where that is an instance where I don't have an issue with that person being pardoned, because they should not have been in jail for that long anyway. I'm a firm believer in rehabilitation over imprisonment, but I understand that if you do the crime, you have to face some sort of consequence. I do, however, think that the prison system here in the United States is exceptionally cruel and does not prioritize rehabilitation like how they do in the Nordic countries or how they do in Germany. You are effectively treated as subhuman when you go to prison. There are no resources for you to reassimilate back into civilian life. I mean, they offer like collegiate courses, and they have libraries where you can read up on certain subjects, but there needs to be a more robust rehabilitation system that not only includes like hard skills, but also includes the necessary mental health care that goes along in rehabilitation. When you encounter people who grow up impoverished and they come from a lower income background, like, they are dealing with PTSD. A lot of people don't recognize that children growing up in like Chicago, in Baltimore, in inner cities all over the country, like the Bronx, where people are routinely like being killed, being stabbed. You're dealing with PTSD. And these children do not have the means to help deal with it. They, of course, do not have the social safety net necessary in that regard either. So they just resort to committing crime. I went off on a massive tangent here, more so just to elucidate my position on this. I don't have an issue with someone going to prison. What I have an issue with is the ridiculously long prison sentences that a lot of people are given and the lack of rehabilitation that is done within the criminal justice system here in the United States of America. In front of me, I have a list of people who have been pardoned by Donald Trump thus far. That includes politicians, NBA YoungBoy. As I mentioned, he also pardoned Larry Hoover, who was a gang leader who went to prison in, I think, like the 70s for murder. He spent the entirety of his life in prison. This is courtesy of the Associated Press. President Donald Trump issued a series of pardons on Wednesday, awarding them to a former New York congressman, a Connecticut governor, a rapper known as NBA YoungBoy, a labor union leader, and a one-time Army officer who flouted safety measures during the coronavirus pandemic. Trump's actions mixed his willingness to pardon prominent Republicans and other supporters, donors, and friends with the influence of Alice Marie Johnson, whom Trump reportedly named his border czar after he offered her pardon in 2020. He also commuted the sentence of Larry Hoover, a former Chicago gang leader, serving a life sentence at a supermax prison in Colorado. Hoover was first imprisoned in connection with the murder in 1973 and was convicted of running a criminal enterprise in 1998, but later renounced his criminal past and petitioned for a reduced sentence. He remains incarcerated on state charges. Louisiana rap artist NBA YoungBoy, whose real name is Kentrell Gaulden and whose stage moniker stands for Never Broke Again, also received a Trump pardon. In 2024, he was sentenced to just under 2 years in prison on gun-related charges after he acknowledged having possessed a weapon, despite being a convicted felon. YoungBoy also pleaded guilty to his role in a prescription drug fraud ring in Utah. This is what I'm more so talking about. 2 years for a gun charge, especially after having already been convicted of a crime, I don't think is that ridiculous of a sentence. However, Trump is beginning to pardon people who haven't even gone to prison. They haven't faced consequences for their actions. They haven't been given time to reflect on and say to themselves, wow, I actually did something wrong. That's a horrible precedent to set because these people will only be further emboldened to commit these types of, I'm going to say white collar crime, because that's more so what I'm alluding to, especially with this one burger boy who we're going to talk about in a little bit, the sheriff in Virginia. Gaulden and the other pardons were confirmed Wednesday evening by two White House officials who spoke on condition of anonymity. Trump also spent the week issuing high-profile pardons. Video released by a White House aide showed Johnson in the Oval Office on Tuesday as Trump called the daughter of Todd and Julie Chrisley of the reality show Chrisley Knows Best to say he was pardoning them. Their show spotlighted the family's extravagant lifestyle, but the couple was convicted of conspiring to defraud banks in the Atlanta area out of more than $30 million in loans by submitting false documents. Their daughter, Savannah, addressed the Republican convention last summer and had long said her parents were treated unfairly. Now, another wrinkle you'll notice here is a large majority of these folks who Trump is pardoning are Republican aligned and in some cases friendly with the president of the United States of America. As you can see here, Savannah Chrisley spoke at the RNC last year. Donald Trump's corruption is so brazen at this point that there is not even an attempt to hide it. There hasn't been an attempt to hide it since the beginning of his term, even before he was inaugurated as president. He of course had that infamous cryptocurrency scam where he did a rug pull on a bunch of his supporters. This guy has been a clown, a con artist, a scammer for his entire life. But now he's just out in the open with it. It's to the point where if you commit a crime and you say that you love President Trump, he'll pardon you. I don't know if this is how Youngboy got out of prison. I don't know if Youngboy is like a secret Trump supporter, but as you can see with the Chrisley family, there are several Republican Congress people as well who also got pardoned on the grounds that they are just fucking Republican. Also Wednesday, Trump pardoned James Callahan, a New York union leader who pleaded guilty to failing to report $315,000 in gifts from an advertising firm and was about to be sentenced. And the president pardoned former Connecticut Governor John Rowland, a Republican who served from 95 to 04 and was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison for charges related to concealing his involvement in 2 federal election campaigns. Do you know how fucking stupid you have to be to get banged on election crimes? Like anything related to election funding or like election interference, bribery is like effectively legalized in the United States. Lobbying is just legalized bribery. To get banged on that, you have to actually be the dumbest fucking person running for office. He also pardoned Michael Grimm, a New York Republican who resigned from Congress after being convicted of tax fraud. He won election in 2014 despite being under indictment for underreporting wages and revenue at a restaurant that he ran. Grimm eventually resigned after pleading guilty and serving 8 months in prison. Last year, Grimm was paralyzed from the chest down when he was thrown off a horse during a polo tournament. Yet another Trump pardon was issued for Army Lieutenant Mark Bradshaw, who was convicted in 2022 of reporting to work without undergoing a COVID-19 test. Alice Johnson was convicted in 96 on 8 criminal counts related to a Memphis-based cocaine trafficking operation. Trump commuted her life sentence in 2018 at the urging of Kim Kardashian West, allowing for Johnson's early release. Johnson was then featured as the speaker on the final night of the RNC. We're gonna get to Burger Boy, and I'm calling him Burger Boy because, listen, I do my best to like be nice to people, but I do think that if you're a bad person, I'm allowed to make fun of you. It really is that simple. I mean, this guy is built like a this guy's built like a burger, bro. I'm sorry. Like, look at my man, dude. I'm sorry, but like, look at my man's neck, dog. This shit is crazy. Like, there are 2 types of cop. There are 2 types of cop build. You got the bald skinny guy who's like low key jacked, and then you got the round mound of rebound right here. No disrespect to Charles Barkley. This gentleman was also pardoned by Donald Trump. His name is Scott Jenkins, and he was convicted on fraud and bribery charges. A jury from Culpeper County found him guilty of accepting more than $75,000 in bribes last December in exchange for making several businessmen into law enforcement officers without them being trained. This guy deserves to go to prison. Why? Because he is endangering other people. This may be a nonviolent offense, but he is putting his community at risk. Police officers already do not receive comprehensive enough training to deal with all of the shit that they have to see. And now you're basically deputizing people who just cut you a check. These people don't get firearm training. They don't get crisis management training. They literally don't have any understanding of what it takes to be a police officer. And that is really fucking frightening because somebody is going to make a call to the police and they are unequipped to deal with this situation. They are putting themselves at risk, the people making the call to the police, and they are putting their family members at risk as well. Jenkins, a longtime Trump supporter, was sentenced in March to 10 years in prison. He was set to report to jail on Tuesday, but due to Trump's pardon, he will not spend a single day behind bars. This is what I mean. Is 10 years a little too long for this? I would reckon yes, although it depends on the type of prison that he's going to. If he goes to a federal prison for white-collar criminals, I think 10 years is just fucking fine because that's not even really a prison. Like, that is what prison should be for everybody, right? That is more reflective of European style prison than American style prison. But he's not even facing the consequences for what he did. And as we know, when cops commit crime, they're put on administrative leave and then allowed to return to work at a later date. This guy is a threat to his community. He is also a threat to every burger. Okay, I gotta stop. I gotta stop. I gotta stop fat shaming this guy. Sheriff Scott Jenkins, his wife Patricia, and their family have been dragged through hell, Trump wrote in a post on Truth Social. Trump said Jenkins was the victim of an overzealous Biden Department of Justice. The judge who presided over Jenkins' case, Robert Ballou, was appointed by former President Joe Biden, but it was a jury trial. Like, this is what's so fucked up about this, is the party of law and order, the Republican Party, now think that any Republican who goes to jail is a political enemy. And people who and like MAGA eats this shit the fuck up. They no longer believe in law and order. The fact of the matter is this. If MAGA sees someone else who is MAGA going to prison, they don't think that they're a criminal. Like, they could be a fucking rapist. They could be a pedophile. They could be a murderer. And MAGA's like, no, maybe that person does actually deserve to walk free. And we have a litmus test for this, folks. The January 6th pardons. 1,500 January 6th rioters were pardoned by Trump a couple months ago. I will acknowledge, and I did acknowledge when I covered this story, that people who were just convicted of trespassing and like low-level infractions don't deserve to go to prison. But there were individuals who assaulted police officers. Furthermore, some of those folks committed sex crimes after they got out of prison. Like, what the fuck are we doing here? You are making the United States significantly less safe. Trump called Jenkins a wonderful person who was prosecuted by radical left monsters and left for dead. Jenkins was found guilty of 1 count of conspiracy, 4 counts of honest services fraud, and 7 counts of bribery concerning programs receiving federal funds. Prosecutors said he accepted bribes from 8 people, including 2 undercover FBI agents. Oh my god. By the way, this is the kind of work that the FBI should be doing. But Dan Bongino and Kash Patel is having them investigate the cocaine that was found at the White House 3 fucking years ago, or 2 years ago. The men who bribed Jenkins paid for auxiliary deputy sheriff positions so they could avoid traffic tickets and carry concealed firearms without a permit. Like, yeah, these people are a fucking danger to society. If you want to carry a firearm, you need a license. Like, I do not agree with these fucking people who can just tote, who can just carry. Like, no, I think that if you want a gun, there needs to be a rigorous system that which you have to pass through. Like, you can't just become a fucking cop so you could carry. Like, that's so fucking stupid. Like, that's so dangerous. Cops, like trained police officers, already fucking shoot people when they shouldn't. And now you want someone who's had no firearm training at any point in their life to interact with the public? No, dude. No. This is reckless. Although auxiliary department sheriffs are volunteer positions, they can have law enforcement powers equivalent to those of paid officers. Trump said, what the fuck is going on, like, in Virginia? Like, it's so funny to see how different every fucking state operates. Because here in New York, auxiliary police officers are basically glorified security guards. They have no power in any way, shape, or form. Like, if you encounter an auxiliary police officer, the worst that they can do is call the actual cops, right? Bouncers at bars have more power than fucking auxiliary police officers, because if you're at a bar and you're getting rowdy, the bouncer can fucking throw you out onto the street. An auxiliary police officer cannot do that. And yet in Virginia, for some reason, these folks have the same powers as regular cops. Trump said Jenkins tried to offer evidence in his defense, but the judge refused to allow it, shut him down, and then went on a tirade. The acting U.S. attorney for Virginia said at the time of Jenkins' sentencing that the ex-sheriff violated his oath of office. Yeah, which is true. He said the case proved that officials who used their positions for unjust personal enrichment would be held accountable, but Jenkins appealed to Trump for help after his conviction. I believe if he heard the information, I know he would help if he knew my story. He reportedly said in April on a webinar hosted by the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. Jenkins was elected sheriff in 2011 and took office in 2012. He was reelected in 2015 and 2019. The former policeman is the latest in a long line of Trump supporters to receive a pardon. In January, the president issued almost 1,600 pardons or commutations to people charged over the 2021 Capitol riots. The U.S. Constitution says that a president has the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. A pardon represents legal forgiveness, ends any further punishment, and restores rights such as being able to vote or run for office. As I mentioned, I don't have an issue with pardoning people who are treated unjustly by the system, because I understand that sometimes the system is unjust. But this instance is one in which this person needs to go to prison. This person needs to face the consequences for making his community unsafe. You're a police officer. You take an oath to protect and serve. I understand that police officers, like 99% of the time, do not operate in that capacity. But he's going out of his way to make sure that he is a threat to his community. Now, of course, naturally, it gets worse. Like, it just always gets worse with this administration. Do you guys remember a couple of years ago when there was conspiracy to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer? You guys remember that? Do you remember how there was legitimate evidence that the FBI presented in which these individuals had a relatively well-detailed plan to carry out this kidnapping? I do. And Trump is considering pardoning them. Donald Trump says he's considering pardoning defendants in Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot. Now, this is not the case of someone just like writing on social media, shit posting about committing violence towards an elected official. No, the FBI brought receipts. Law enforcement brought a 17-page long report detailing the crime that these guys were attempting to orchestrate. President Trump said Wednesday he will take a look at pardoning a group of men charged with planning to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer in 2020, calling the case, which has resulted in 2 convictions and 2 guilty pleas, a railroad job. I will take a look at it. It's been brought to my attention. I did watch the trial. It looked to me like somewhat of a railroad job. You know, I really do love the railroad. I think that one of the greatest achievements in the history of modern American politics was the Continental Railroad. I don't call it the Transcontinental Railroad because that's woke and that's gay, but I do think that the railroad is a tremendous achievement. I apologize. I had some auditory issues. I don't know quite where the mic cut out, so I'm just gonna reread the last couple paragraphs. During Mr. Trump's first term in 2020, a federal prosecutor charged 6 people with conspiring to kidnap Whitmer, a Democrat who was facing backlash at the time for the state's COVID-19 policies. The indictment described the men, some of whom were linked to a militia group allegedly conducting surveillance of Whitmer's vacation home and hatching a kidnapping plot that involved blowing up a nearby bridge. I'm not going to read the affidavit again, but these men met in Ohio and were encouraging other members of this militia group to talk to their neighbors and spread this message. These people are dangerous. And if I'm repeating myself and it did not cut out, I apologize for the redundancy. Defense attorneys argued that the men weren't serious about the plot, casting them as wannabes who enjoyed playing army and ranting about the government, but were not going to act on their rhetoric. Yeah, I highly doubt that these were just like a couple gamers in Xbox party chat joking about overthrowing society. Like, I know that when I'm joking around with my friends, I come together at a neutral location and hatch a well thought out and and very detailed plan about how to overthrow the tyrannical Gretchen Whitmer governorship. They argued that they were entrapped by the FBI and confidential informants. A federal appeals court reviewed the claims that the judge prevented them from mounting an effective entrapment defense, but upheld their convictions last month. Dude, like someone went to the local police department, and the police department reached out to the FBI. Like, I don't know how this defense works. I mean, clearly it doesn't, because a couple of them got convicted. Several other people were convicted in state court of links to the plot against Whitmer, often raising similar entrapment defenses. Mr. Trump is not able to pardon people on state charges. Mr. Trump clashed with Whitmer in 2020, treating Liberate Michigan amid protests in the state for Whitmer's policies to restrict the spread of COVID-19. After the kidnapping arrest, Mr. Trump lashed out at Whitmer for not thanking him. Gretchen Whitmer has also grown very close to the Trump administration. It seems there have been multiple instances where she has been alongside Donald Trump when he is giving speeches or talks or something to that degree. Mr. Trump has used his pardon power extensively in his second term, drawing scrutiny for pardoning almost everybody convicted in the January 6th riot. This shit is crazy, dog. The degree to which he's going with these pardons it's insane. It's insane.